Sweet. So today we're going to talk about probably one of the most influential elements or kind of like methods, techniques, concepts, tools in music. And I would say in modern music, most, if not all, of the modern genres are somewhat infused with the concepts of breakbeats, if not breakbeats themselves. Last week, we talked about drum and bass. And drum and bass is one of the breakbeat styles. When we talk about breakbeats, we essentially talk about loops or sampling of old funk and soul records. I did share with you in the chat, and I will send it in the email, um, a folder with a lot of breakbeats. Yes, Juan. Okay, yes, excellent. Absolutely. The Amen break. With a lot of breakbeats. So these ones were sampled, were recorded from old soul and funk records. They tend to have a section in the song that is essentially a drum solo. Essentially, like the drummer go wild. And what happens is first of all, this back in the day of no music production, you wanted to play music, you had to, just focus on one instrument. Today we see a lot of multi-instrumentalists, although they were always existing. Today we see a lot of people that are okay on a lot of instruments. And back in the day, you could see a lot, although even today we see like there's amazing studio musicians, but musicians who are kind of spending all their life on their instruments, virtuosos of that instrument. When it comes to drums, crazy grooves and a lot of funky, more complex drum patterns that we're used to from the music at the time, whatever, or before that. And even after that, if we go to disco and stuff, disco, we can consider it as a much simpler drum patterns than all these breakbeats. So breakbeats, they sampled it. Let's listen to a few breakbeats just as examples. And actually, I will share with you in the PDF this link. Here, I can also paste it in the chat. Here's a few, and it's not all of them, of famous breakbeats. This is probably the most famous of all. Oh, and this is I guess the entire song. So let's just, the other ones will just listen to the loop, to the actual break. But this is what musicians used to do. Listen to the song, go to the break. And then sample it, just a break, and then make music with it. Okay? Now, with breakbeats and all these styles that are based on breakbeats, like drum and bass, for example, took the breakbeats and sped them up and initially created jungle or breakbeats hardcore. But if we go, for example, to the Amen break, okay, I'll put it here. And I'm going to first set up this clip. And by the way, it doesn't matter where we are. If we want to be here, it's okay. But I want everyone to also, with time, get comfortable in the session view, just because here is just so much easier to play with loops, come up with ideas. And of course, when you're performing live, it's also useful. But let's work from here. Let's loop this, Command L. And first of all, I'm going to go inside the clip. Let's double click. And let's turn it into an old, kind of like an old sampler. Meaning that right here under the warp mode, I'm going to change it from the default beats to repitch. And repitch, essentially, it's not a warp mode. It's not time stretching. It's acting like an old record player where when you change the BPM, it will also change the pitch. So this break, for example, we can then speed it up. And let me play it and speed it up, and you'll hear the pitch change. Okay, and now we're on those faster speeds. And now if you were at the ambient jungle class, now we're starting to get into those realms of jungles, which also turn into, or were under the umbrella of drum and bass, which we talked about last week, okay? But they're all based on the same breaks that were later on simplified to that basic core rhythm that we saw last week with drum and bass. We'll see it today again with breakbeats. And if we slow it down, by the way, 170, 160, 170, 180, 190 drum and bass from last week. Breakbeats today, we're going to be more in the upper 90s all the way to 130. Okay, that's the breakbeats. But if we slow it down, let me start slowing down. That's where hip hop was born, with those breakbeats, but slowed down to around the hip hop range of BPMs, 80 to 100. And let's loop this. Or maybe we'll loop. I don't want that horn. I'll show you later how to separate stems. Yo, right? Hip hop, or at least the beginning of hip hop. But we're gonna use them in kind of around their original speed, which is this again upper 90s to 130, 140 BPM, maybe even faster. But then we're starting to get into the rave kind of, not rave, but the drum and bass. Now we can argue where it was developed, but from my research, it is arguable that it was developed both in the US with the hip hop and in the UK with rave music. But then, and by the way, this was I would say, in my opinion, one of the coolest styles in the 90s that later became other subgenres like big beat, which we'll talk about in the future. But now, I would say it's much softer feeling. It doesn't feel so aggressive like the modern drum and bass music, dubstep, future bass, whatever it is. It's very chill. So that's why we're going to make Melodic Breaks, where it's somewhat on the chiller side, but is based on these breakbeats, at least in the form. We don't have to use breaks as maybe we'll use breaks just as a background. We'll add our own main kick and bass and snare, but the concepts of the rhythm and kind of the ghost snares, those fills, are essential for this style, just as they might be for drum and bass, jungle, and for some even hip hop as well. Although hip hop very early on completely broke it down just to the kick snare and maybe like a simple hat kind of thing. Berlin club scene, yeah, I would say, listen, if we talk about the early Berlin club scene, club, yeah, kind of club, but Kraftwerk and all of those. So it depends on what era you're talking about. But the modern era, I would say the Berlin is definitely more associated with techno rather than breakbeats, although there are subgenres of techno which are using breakbeats, or at least the breakbeats rhythms. Okay, nice. So when we say breakbeats, we're not necessarily meaning to use an actual sample of a breakbeat, although we will, and it's usually what you do. But it just means that kind of range with that type of rhythm and a lot of those ghost snares and fills in between the main kick and snare. Okay, so let's say first of all establish our fundamental core kick and snare rhythm that is the same with drum and bass, and we can argue also with hip hop, R&B, and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm gonna create two audio tracks here, one for the kick and one for the snare. I gave you a few free sample packs, but if anyone have Ableton Live 12, under packs, you can download a pack called Golden Era Hip Hop. If you don't have any packs or you're looking to download more, just scroll on the bottom, you'll see available packs. You have to be logged in to your Ableton account. So you can find it here if you have Ableton 12 suite. And by the way, this was developed by Sound Oracle, who's a great sound designer. It used to be the sound designer for Timbaland, or still is. So here we can go under samples and one shots, and we can find the kick and snare. The reason I go into this golden age era hip hop, because a lot of these kick and snare are inspired or sampled and processed from breakbeats. So we just get that kind of chopped of a breakbeat. Now, before I go and do this, I do want to mention, no, we'll do this later. Let's first do the fundamental core rhythm. Let's find a kick. That's fine. Let's drag it here. Nice. Now, by the way, if the browser is too low in volume, and if you want to turn it up or down, and also the metronome, it's right here. Okay, this is the volume of the browser and the metronome. Okay, let's place the kick. I'm just going to focus on 2 bars right now. I'm going to change the grid to an eighth note. And let's make our basic kick pattern that we saw in drum and bass, but now we're in just lower BPMs. Let's find the snare. Maybe this, and we place it on every second and fourth beat, exactly like our drum and bass. Okay, let me turn those 2 down. I'm going to select both tracks with shift. Select the first one, shift, select the second one, then I can turn down both of them at the same time. Okay, this is the basic rhythm that then we can start adding breakbeats or make our own underneath it, and we'll do it in a second. But before I do this, I just want to point out that you can take breakbeats and make drum kits very easily out of those breakbeats. So you can make your own kick and snare from a breakbeat sample. Let me go back to our breakbeats. It's the one I pasted in the chat, but there's a lot going around online. So you'll find a lot of breakbeats sample packs. Usually they have the same breakbeats. Some of them might be processed differently. Let's find something with, let's say I like this kick and snare, and there's also some percussion here. Some cowbell. Let's drag it in. Actually, I don't even have to drag it in, by the way. I can just right click right here on the sample itself and choose slice to new MIDI track. Okay. It's going to ask me, once I click it, how I want to slice it. So it's going to, I want it to detect all the kick and snares and stuff automatically. So I'm going to choose transient. It should be selected by default. And the slicing preset, it may be something we'll spend time on in a different class, but right now we'll use the built-in, and I don't want to warp it. I don't want to time stretch. At least I don't want to time stretch the samples. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to create a new MIDI track with a drum rack with all those slices, and also a MIDI clip playing those slices chronologically, just by order. Okay, we don't really need this clip. You can use it if you want. If you wanna, this is your starting point with the slicing and start moving it around, whatever. But let's right now delete it. Now we have a drum rack right here. Here's a hat. Here's a snare. Okay, I can use just this cowbell. I can rename it. I can later save it. Okay, so slice to new MIDI track is great because it can very easily create a drum rack for you from the break that you're using. Okay, consider that. Let me know if there's any questions. Sweet. Let's continue. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to add.
Question.
Yes, please, Nisi.
When you're looking at, when you were just looking at your drum rack right there, before you do, can you just undo for 1 second? Right here, if you were just looking at this right now, would you go to make a MIDI clip and then make patterns? Like just looking at that right now, can you just envision?
Me personally, I would spend a minute.
Yeah.
So it's easier for me in the MIDI clip. Okay, let me first open up a MIDI clip because in Ableton 12 we can see both. So let's see what I'm doing, why I'm renaming them. I'm going to highlight these 2 bars. I'm going to right click and choose highlight these 2 bars and choose insert MIDI clip. Okay, nice. I'm going to also bring up the drum rack because now in 12 we can see both of them at the same time. So here's my clip. And the reason I'm renaming them, so it's easier for me, it's not only called slice, but I can tell what it is. Okay, let's call it fill snare. And then I can start creating my own breakbeat. Let's just do the basic rhythm here. I'm going to do just 1 bar right now. Let's bring up let's find another kick. I'm going to turn on the MIDI preview. So when I move the sample, I can hear what it is. Nice. And also, let's extend oh, it's looping. No, we'll just use this. Let's find another kick. I'm going to turn off the looping. That's the slicing preset before we saw. Usually we can make a better one our own. Let's take the loop length all the way down and this. Okay, sweet. Nice. And then I'll start kind of adding more, but this is let me find here a basic kick. Okay, and then I'll start adding in between. Right, and then I'll fill in more. But you can see where I'm going with this. Ooh, let's add some cowbells. I want some more snares. And then I will start processing it with effects, and maybe it's a good time to tell you about this. What did I call it? Break bus driver. I made a rack for you. I will share it. It's for Ableton Live 12, okay? I'll have another rack. I'll show it you for 11 as well. But if I load it, I usually load it after breaks. It's just going to boost them. Okay? But again, this is a great way, not only for breakbeats, for anything, to take a loop and very quickly turn it into a drum rack, or essentially a drum kit if it's a drum loop. Slice the new MIDI track. It's an old feature which is still amazing. Okay? Now, just to mention very quickly, another quick way to do this is to do it in a simpler. So that means I'll take a break. I'll drop it in on a MIDI track, an empty MIDI track right here. Here it is. And then I can put it in slice mode. Now, this is the same. We also now sliced it. Right, I have all these slices. I can trigger. I can create a MIDI clip like I just did and do the same thing. Although here it doesn't show me the slices. It starts from C1. Right? So you can do it like this. The only difference is here, if I do any changes, it will be for all the slices at the same time. If I repitch, it will change the pitch for all the slices. If I reverse it, it will reverse everything. If I add effects, it adds effects on all the slices. So that is the advantage of using a drum rack. Let's say right click and choose slice to new MIDI track. We can move from here into a drum rack. And the advantage here is that each pad, it's essentially its own track. I can change the pitch, I can reverse, I can add effects, MIDI effects, just for this one slice. Okay, so that's the advantage. But you can use simpler, just faster. Drop, slice, you're there. Okay, you can already start. So the slice to new MIDI track, I would say, is extremely valuable when it comes to breakbeats, because you can very quickly kind of start doing this stuff. Okay.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, please.
In the slice view right here, is there any way, or when you're like, if you like you just said, you don't have you know how you slip the material, you have the same in and out point. Like in the other drum rack, I was copying samples and putting and then varying them like it was a long dialogue piece, and I was trying to grab out different chunks of the dialogue.
This might be a good feature. This might be a good option.
But
how do you
slip? Like when you're in the drum rack cell and you just copy it, you have the same exact part of it. Can you slip in there so that you don't have to grab those every time?
You're talking about grabbing both of them at the same time?
Right.
Or I have no idea. I have no idea. But let me first tell everyone what's going on, what we're talking about here. If I take an audio file, let's take a longer one, and I loop it, let's say right here, I loop it something like this, okay? I can move, as you can see, the entire, or even from here, the entire loop bracket, you see? But here in the simpler, you can't. And this has been a long kind of issue that you'll have to adjust the beginning and end. So if you have a dialogue, I would recommend, you're saying you're copying it? No, I would recommend slice to new MIDI track. Put the dialogue on the arrangement view and slice to new MIDI track. That might give you the best result already. And then it's just maybe small adjustments rather than copying, adjusting. Try that, okay? Let me know if there's any questions. Okay.